Hello and welcome to the Road to Interoperability. In the next hour we will discuss the evolution of the H2020 InterConnect project led by us in InterConnect that addresses the main challenges of the electrical system of the future. In a decarbonized, renewable-based energy system, there we have a lot of challenges. One of them is the variability associated to the primary resource. This leads to the need for us to have flexibility that necessarily has to come from end users. But for this flexibility to appear, we need to have the proper tools and technology that allows them to respond to this demanding operation scenario. This was the motto for InterConnect, where we address this challenge by creating a common ground of technologies and services to be adopted for end users using interoperability in buildings and grids. The idea of the project resulted from a set of European Commission initiatives on interoperability that, together with our perception of the evolution of the electrical system, were the stepstone for us to start building a consortium that had a critical mass to address the challenges that we were facing. A particular study that started in 2016 addressing the interoperability for enabling demand-side flexibility fostered a set of discussions in Brussels together with TNO and DNVGL and SMIC that later resulted in the first draft of this outline of the project. To give you some context on how this study was important, we have a testimony from our colleague Willem Strabing from SMIC that will briefly point out where it all began.
Hello, my name is Willem Strabing. I'm involved in the InterConnect project and I'm working for SMIC, the Association for Smart Energy Solution Providers. Now, all of you might know that the energy sector is in an unprecedented transition with the introduction of renewable resources, such as wind power, solar power, and others that cause new dynamics and opportunities in the energy system. Associations such as SMIC have a huge role in supporting the energy transition process by fostering interoperability, using existing standards, and focusing on aligning them to cross-link three industry domains: energy, ICT, and home building automation. Back in 2018, we published the Interoperability for Demand-Side Flexibility report. In cooperation with TNO, we used the SAREF ontology as the solution for alignment of the most relevant standards. The InterConnect project is now materializing the interoperable digitalization of the energy system, based on that same concept.
One of the most enthusiastic contributors to this idea, also involved in this study, was Laura Daniel from TNO, that will very briefly explain to us what are the main challenges of interoperability.
My name is Laura Daniele and I'm a senior scientist at the Data Science Department at TNO. The InterConnect project is a big, large European project that wants to achieve interoperability, create interoperability solutions that connect smart grids, smart buildings and smart homes. Separate technologies already exist, but the main challenge is about connecting and making the separate components working together. And ontologies, models, semantic models, and the type of models that I help creating, they serve this purpose. It is so difficult to make this happen because these domains have evolved in parallel in time, in different ways from different stakeholders. So now it's very difficult to make them understand each other, talk together and communicate with each other in a way, in a common, shared way that has consensus.
So what were the challenges launched by the European Commission? Well, on the one hand, to have a user-centric design where users are in the center of this development process, to foster plug and play in both ICT and energy domains, what the main challenges that we have here. So how did we respond? How does InterConnect respond? Well, in fact, by creating a set of large-scale pilots and building an ecosystem that, together with a set of use cases in buildings and grids, will foster the creation of a digital single market that will actually enforce this plug-and-play concept. So how important is, in fact, this project? Well, we have a strong investment from the European Commission with 36 million euros of financing, leveraged by another additional 6 million of co-investment from private partners. And this shows, in fact, the commitment that everyone has in this project. Additionally, we have a cascade funding mechanism with 3.6 million that will support the close-to-market validation and also allow us to fill in the gaps that we will have during the development of the project. Our team, we are over 50 from 11 different countries with 14 RTOs, 10 manufacturers and integrators, 9 ICT and IoT providers, 5 consultancy companies, 4 sets of end users, 3 DSOs, 3 retailers and 3 stakeholders associations. So we have the critical mass to address the challenge that we are facing. In the end, what is our overarching objective? Well, to disrupt the sector by 2023 with a set of innovative services and solutions that will allow the full decarbonization of the electrical system without losing its major need of being resilient and sustainable.
So, how are we tackling the challenges of this very large project as Luis just introduced them? We basically define 6 basic steps that we need to cover throughout the time frame of the project. And this means that at different stages we have to deal with different aspects of the project. So the first one was to focus on the development of energy and non-energy services, departing from ideas and already ambitions that partners have on existing services and to take them as a proper way to match the technology with these services in a market-oriented perspective, to take them in the pilot that we'll have in the project. So this was the first step that covered this ground. As a second step, we had this part of the definition of a reference architecture. This is fundamental because this is the basis for the early agreement that later on will lead us to the interoperability. So this is basically where we've defined a specification and we use the related standards to give cover and to provide support for this reference architecture that we are using in the project, and it's actually public. So the third step had us taking a look on the semantic interoperability. And this is the key point of this project. This is where we're actually developing innovative aspects, different components that we will later on integrate into the digital platforms. These semantic components will give birth to or support to the semantic service and interoperability that will be demonstrated into the pilots. And this is the contribution that we're making in this project. So, as a fourth step, we of course needed to create the actual platforms, the digital platforms that will give coverage to these services based on interoperability. So we have a catalog of services available. We actually welcome other participants, as you will see, to promote their own services aligned with this framework in the reference architectures towards the serifization of other services and other components to be integrated in our interoperability framework. And this is quite important, as you will see. Moreover, as a fifth step, of course, we need to go into the field, and this is where we actually are taking the technology and the services to actual end users with different sets of buildings, from residential buildings to tertiary buildings, as you will see in a while. And this is where we basically put up to the test the interoperability concept and the way we are using in the different pilots technologies that are similar in one way, but other technologies also that are covering specific aspects in an interoperable way. Finally, of course, being such a large project, we need to provide impact to the society. So the first round of impacts is, of course, on policy making to the Commission and other relevant partners. Second of all, we're living in a world of standardized approaches, and so we did it the same way. We incremented this vision on interoperability with actual contributions on the semantic framework, which we will be passing on to the standardization bodies, which is quite relevant. And this is the fifth step, the sixth step. So this led us to the innovation path. So we established an innovation path that we want to have in the project, and we'll walk you through this path towards innovation. So the first step is, of course, to depart from something that already exists. This is an innovation action. This is a project focused on delivering actual innovation to end users. And there's a starting ground here where we already took technologies and systems that partners had with higher technology readiness levels, departing from level 6, willing to adopt new postures and to address new services within the project. So this meant considering initiatives such as SAREF, such as Spine, FiWare, and S2, all together in the definition of the reference architecture to make sure that we use this existing background and we introduce this new side of innovation. So it's incremental innovation, as you will see. Finally, of course, all of these developments started somewhere. So previous projects already dealt with some of these issues at the very ground, but probably they didn't see yet a way of applying this in an interoperable way. So this is the first part. This is where we started. Of course, this takes us to the use cases and the services that we're promoting here. And here we have to distinguish three approaches that we have in the project. So we're either defining new services for existing technology, or we're looking for existing new technology to support existing services. Either way, there's an incremental step here that we're making for both technologies and services all together as relates to innovation. So this is actually something, as you will see, that we're actually very keen on promoting and ensuring that everyone outside the project even understands this movement. Interoperability. We need to look for interoperability. This is the groundwork and this is the key message here. So we're departing from SAREF. So SAREF is the reference ontology that are taking us here. We've seen already from previous videos that this is the ground and seminal work done previously that we took on our side, and we make the actual improvements to cover these new services and new technologies that basically still didn't have the proper definition within SAREF with the proper components to deal with those. So this is the incremental side that we have from this interoperability front. As the fourth step here is, in fact, the core technologies. Of course, all of this only works if we have proper ICT and IoT technologies. And this means looking for different solutions that we can use to support this, ranging from, of course, the SARIFI services. So these services were SARIFIs and are being SARIFIs continuously within the project. They will be further SARIFIs with other participants that are willing to adhere to the project, also with their own contributions and interests, with the cascading fund, as you will see. And most of all, at the end, we will have this marketplace where all of these services will be there. Of course, in between, we'll cover the usual technologies that we see in other demonstrations. So artificial intelligence will be there in most of the services. Machine learning will cover a lot of the aspects that we need to ensure for the end users to have actual services that they can take away as convenient service, as something that change the way of living in their day-to-day life. And also other platforms based on IoT, gamification, peer-to-peer, and of course the other side of this project, which is the grid. So it is important to remind us that interoperability is only possible if we cover the domain of the buildings and the domain of the grid. Actually, this is a centerpiece of the project to look at these two axes, where we have the buildings as cooperative, flexible assets, providing services and providing added value to other stakeholders, namely the grid. So of course, this is something that we also need to consider. The pilots, we will have an opportunity to dive in more in detail to the pilots, but the common ground here is demand-side flexibility. And this is what motivates us in the plane of energy to use the digitalization that was already mentioned by Luis, to make grounds for this demand-side flexibility to find actual ways of being implemented. This means, of course, considering different aspects. The case of multi-utility is something that we're covering. Again, this grid side that we need to cover and need to ensure to bring to the game stakeholders stakeholders that also have a relevant role in the decarbonization of the energy sector. Finally, of course, this cross-sector. This is not a single story. We cannot tell it alone by a single partner, and we're basically looking for something that bridges out together from several sectors, end users, technology providers, integrators, service providers, and utilities all together in the same game. This is the only way we can reach out actual impact in the project. And of course, already mentioned a while ago, we're not just working for the project itself, we're working for the wider community, for the public. So we have the cascading funding that will allow us to boost the outputs and the outreach of the project with newer solutions being brought in. So those willing to participate in the project will find the proper tools to use the existing or newer technologies also to demonstrate new services or new technologies. And this is what we're also developing together with the partners that are adhering to the cascaded funding. Of course, we cannot escape the key impacts of this whole innovation. So we're basically covering this frame from the technology side to the business. So we need to find ways to match this all together. How are we doing this? So the technology side, it will be mentioned in a while. We're diving into aspects such as knowledge engine, these generic adapters and these peer-to-peer marketplaces that will create this systemized and available data in an interoperability plane. So this is where we can use the same understanding between the different stakeholders, where we can talk the same language. This is what we have in terms of digital technology, the semantic interoperability. This is where we're all getting in touch with each other and understanding exactly how the information is being exchanged and perceived by everyone. Keep in mind that this exchange of information is between machines, so we're creating ways of machines to communicate with each other properly and understand what each machine wants to say to each other and the knowledge that entails. So this enables, of course, this flexibility side. So again, back into the non-energy and energy services. This is something that it's the basis for the project, and this is our focus. So we have non-energy services and energy services that we need to cover and support for demand-side flexibility. This entails also the flexibility for end users to choose which type of technology they want to have, which type of technology they want to integrate, and later on, if they want to change their mind, they have also this flexibility overall to choose differently, to choose wisely. This takes us to the drivers that we're setting up here, with the societal challenges being the main ones, where we're covering this secure, clean, and efficient energy. This is the paramount message here for the decarbonization. But in fact, internally, we're using these innovative services to test them in large-scale pilots. So we have 7 large-scale pilots. We will be testing different services. And here I would like just to give you an idea of some of these services, or the most relevant ones that you can take from this session. So, of course, demand-side flexibility. We're using different sources of data to create new services that leverage on data to create this service for end users. So this crowd sensing of data can be used to foster demand-side flexibility. There's also this part of using and understanding what the final users of energy need to have, what they are looking for. Try to understand exactly what are their preferences, what are their motivations, what are their drivers, and most of all, to try and understand how we can use that information to build up knowledge. And this knowledge is exactly what will take us between different platforms and create, again, this notion of interoperability and build these Lego-alike services. So, of course, gamification needs to come into play, because if we are involving end users, one thing is for sure, we need to find ways to engage them and to motivate them. Services alone on paper, they don't work. So we need to have actual users, and part of the service definition that we did, where we use co-creation, design thinking methodologies, allowed us to use now these gamification strategies to define services that actual end users will see as added value. Interoperability between systems that manage the building. So home energy management systems that we will be seeing the next years in our own houses, taking into account the different resources and assets that we have available. These systems will be able to interconnect and to talk with these other systems to explore what are the characteristics of those systems, understand what exactly we have as assets to promote flexibility, and make sure that information goes to a decision-making entity that takes decision and helps the end user take those decisions. cross-sector is also something that we're approaching here. Services alone, we're not just discussing end users and residential users, we're also discussing tertiary users. As you will see, some of our pilots do cover tertiary side. So this is something that we're covering as cross-sector. Residential buildings, tertiary buildings, and take it further for something or someone that can use this service and this flexibility to leverage another service. So to use that energy for something more valuable than it is right now and actually foster that flexibility for the end users. The demand side flexibility in the grid needs to have a purpose. And we all know it that we have a resilient grid for most of us, where we have an actual supply of electricity at all times without having to worry about that. But in the background, there are DSOs and utilities looking forward to make sure that this resiliency exists. And this means this cross-sector, of course, to look for the building's role and to make sure that we are able to interact with the end users of the buildings and basically contribute to this stability of the grid, which is basically one of the massive challenges from the last years due to the integration of renewable. This part of collective decision, this is also another point very dear to us, where we have parts of communities or participants in communities that want to interact with each other and to derive mutual benefits between them with the energy and the non-energy services. So we're also defining strategies to make sure that participants within a community are able to promote and voice out their preferences, and instances are able to cope with that and promote this cooperative nature with the services in communities. And finally, this living as a service. At the end, we're all end users of these services. We need to perceive them as convenient. If we're going to our households, we want to see conveniency there, to experience more comfort, to experience services that facilitate our life and our way of living. These are changing times, and services need to follow this same motto. Finally, this overall impact has two ways. So one of them is, of course, this cross-sector that was already mentioned as the overall challenge and the overall objective, but also the fact that we're not alone. We're not just diving ourselves into this project and using the funding to create interoperability as a wide notion. No, we're involving also participants from cascaded funding and also public participants that want to adhere to the project on themselves and to take advantage of this interoperability momentum. So this is very, very dear to us. So now we go into the pilots, so to the actual deployments, where we will see technologies and services being used in reality. We have 7 pilots ranging from Portugal, Italy, Greece, France, Netherlands, Belgium, and Germany. Of course, all of them have their own specificities, but they also share a lot of commonalities. And this helps us in crossing this bridge of interoperability of solutions that we develop in Portugal, and we are also able to test them in Germany, and vice versa, and within the other pilots. But there are specificities of each of these pilots that enrich the whole consortium and enrich the experience that we're setting up forward within the EU landscape. And this is very important to us. You will see in the videos following right now that we have specific notions set up. So we will start firstly with a video from the Italian pilot, where we will see this social dimension, which is quite concrete and quite specific from that pilot. So I'll propose to watch that video now.
Il progetto prevede la fornitura a un centinaio circa di famiglie di lavatrici di ultima generazione che permetteranno di creare il primo progetto di flessibilità in Italia. Tramite un'apposita app gli utenti setteranno i propri cicli di lavaggi e un'intelligenza artificiale sposterà questi cicli di lavaggio in modo tale da ottimizzare il consumo energetico di tutto il distretto.
Questo è un servizio che in futuro raccoglierà molti utenti all'interno di quelle che vengono dette comunità energetiche.
A livello di comunità stiamo raggiungendo il nostro traguardo, 130 unità abitative per un futuro di sostenibilità. Grazie agli sperimentatori proveremo e sperimenteremo in campo le soluzioni energetiche del domani.
So this was the Italian pilot with this dimension of the social side that we're covering there. The next one is the pilot from the Netherlands, where basically a ground-up pilot is being created as we speak. So we will see now from the Netherlands side the testimony towards the implementation of technology and services in the Netherlands.
Welcome in the center of Eindhoven. In one of the biggest cities of the Netherlands, we will realize in the Stripe S district 2 InterConnect projects. I'm standing in front of one of these pilots, and as you can see, we are building a 22-story building with 160 apartments. We will transform these apartments with interoperable technology from the InterConnect project. This will not only lead to more freedom of technology choice, but also the efficient use of renewable energy resources, provide residents with more comfort, added convenience and safety higher than before in the Netherlands. That's why the name of this building fits perfect with our ambitions. It's called Next Apartments. Through the implementation of the Serif components and technologies, we are able to create an interoperable ecosystem, covering physical infrastructures and digital platforms for affordable home intelligence and sustainable energy use in households. This will provide end users with endless possibilities and adopting easily different services by connecting new plug-and-play hardware from different kind of brands. We see an increase in the market of IoT and smart appliances. People are buying this hardware to create a safer, sustainable and comfortable living experience. They are also increasingly motivated to optimize their energy usage to save cost on the energy bill while reducing their carbon footprint. Currently, most of these solutions are not able to readily interact with each other unless they are part of the same brand. So we see a business opportunity to set a new standard when it comes to integrate normal building installations and appliances with new IoT hardware and software in the house. The first kitchens with smart dishwashers are already installed. The next steps involve installing the physical infrastructure, including the basic set of smart appliances and devices. Furthermore, we are beginning to install a privacy-proof connectivity for the IoT network. With help from the InterConnect project, we are ready for the future by building the smartest apartments in the Netherlands.
So this was the Netherlands pilot, and this is where you can actually see being created a demonstration from the ground up within the pilots in the Netherlands. It's also important to emphasize this investment that partners are taking in creating these demonstrators, because it's something that it's very dear to them too, and they want to promote this interoperability framework as a way to foster new services for their new end users. So the final video that I would like to share with you is another testimony from the Portuguese case. Just to mention that this information can be found in our website, along with more videos about all of the other projects. But this final video shows a different take from the Portuguese case. And the Portuguese case involves tertiary buildings, and this is the distinctive factor here. So we will see how, in this case, Sonai and partner projects are taking this interoperability into the tertiary sector.
InterConnect is an exciting new project where you are able to develop new services regarding energy management, as well as integration of electric mobility in our car park. The Sonai companies are leading the pilot demonstrations in 12 stores where several services will be demonstrated. One of the use cases regards the provision of flexibility to the grid operator, taking advantage of the existing flexibility in the HVAC systems and cooling systems in our tertiary buildings. We'll also test innovative EV charging strategies as part of our convenience services, responding to the needs of our clients in terms of electric mobility. We will also enhance the integration of PV solutions, making sure that our stores are increasingly more positive. Projects like InterConnect are essential to break some of the existing technological barriers and demonstrate the solutions and its potential.
Sonai MC, as end user, will test and validate the technologies that are being developed in 12 different stores within our group, where we are deploying them to support our commercial pilots. Based on the results, Sonai MC could replicate the ones to other Sonai stores, or even to other business units within our group, to leverage and consolidate our sustainability corporate strategy, as well as the decarbonization of the energy sector.
So like David just said, one of the key main outputs of the InterConnect project is the interoperability framework. So the interoperability framework is actually what will enable us to provide semantic interoperability and will be the key output that will provide this data exchange between all the parties and all the services. So the interoperability framework departed from SAREF-based family of ontologies. Given that we are using ontologies, we'll be able to provide here and to include knowledge dissemination. And this is key. The interoperability framework will be based on knowledge dissemination rather than just the plain data exchange. This is paramount for the provision of semantic interoperability, which is one of the key drivers for InterConnect. So let's go into a little bit more detail about what the interoperability framework is. And the interoperability framework has been built from the ground up with three main principles, being the first one, the provision of a registry for interoperable services, where the ecosystem will be able to attend and to provide all of the services that are available and that are interoperable and able to be used. Second, a configurable security framework that will enable all of the services to exchange this data, this knowledge data, in a secure way with configurations and with configurable criteria that is able to the service owners, but also to the users to attend and to provide what their preferences are. And finally, supporting services for system administration. And this is also key to ensure that our ecosystem is present there, it is manageable, and that is also scalable and adjustable to the different criteria that we'll have sponsored on our different pilots. So the secure and trusted semantic interoperability framework, our key proposal here, is based on the provision of interoperability through some gateways. These gateways are actually the interconnection points that allows digital services to exchange knowledge and to build this ecosystem. And this will be the key factor to build cross-domain services, cross-domain digital services. With this technology in place, we'll be able to provide semantic reasoning, and this is also paramount. This is key as the semantic annotated data will enable knowledge dissemination, and based on the provision of an ontology as the basis for our data exchange, we will be able to extrapolate new data from the services in itself, and this is one of the key things and one of the important points on the provision of cross-demand and cross-silo digital services. Moreover, the semantic interoperability framework is based on the concept of disseminating knowledge. So each one of those digital services will employ a knowledge base that will collect the data and that will be the means to this exchange in this new semantic way. Finally, the semantic interoperability framework is built and designed with a scalable and decentralized approach. And this is key as the different nature of each one of the pilots will allow each one of the pilot owners to deploy the same set of tools in different ways and therefore also enable to explore the capabilities of the framework in itself. But let's now address how we can then with this provide the basis to create here digital platforms. So with the interoperability framework, with being built from the ground up with the SAREF-centric ontology, the provision of knowledge exchange, and the provision to then provide semantic reasoning on top of that, these will be the key drivers that will enable digital services to become semantically interoperable and to build this digital ecosystem of interoperable services. So let's now also dive into the main outcomes of the project until month 24, so that is September 2021. And let's address that in three main domains, being the first one, interoperability. So the project so far has reached a stage where the interoperability framework is developed, it was tested, and it was deployed. So it is now operational for partners to use at the consortium and later on through the cascade funding initiatives that we'll just talk about ahead. All of the services and and digital services that we do have here have went through the tariffization process. The tariffization process was a process that is needed to provide the services with the ability to use our interconnection points, so our data gateways. So this process looks at data, looks at the ontology, and provides these data mappings to the services in an undoubtedly way for services to exchange data. So far, 66 services have went through this process and are now ready to join the pilots via the use of the interoperability framework. So we have now, based on these services, a set of semantic-based interactions, and this is important to the data exchange, as I stated before. This will be the key to provide new means for services and also cross-silo and cross-domain capabilities, and therefore to explore new business use cases using the interoperability framework. Finally, on this domain, we have also provided the reference architecture and technology for device-agnostic ecosystem. This means that our reference architecture is now able to cope from devices to services to digital platforms and to adjust to the different domains, being the ICT-wise, the home and comfort, and also the grid front. The second domain that we would like to address here is the community front. So the project has now provided what is the concept for the DSO interface. And this is an important outcome of the project, as it will provide the standardized interface to provision of demand-side flexibility, and to also boost here the interchange of knowledge data between the grid front and also the comfort use cases that we have sponsored on the project. Thirdly, all of the work that has been conducted on the front of the provision of the tariffization services, so looking at the ontologies, addressing the services needs, and including new reference mappings onto the ontology, all of those findings will be bundled and they will be provided and sent to provide SAREF extensions to and be submitted to ETSI and also to Smart M2M for standardization efforts. Finally, the project has also provided some scientific outputs and also the participation in some dissemination events. Particularly here, we have now so far 12 scientific publications and the participation in at least 68 venues where we are disseminating the outputs of the project and also its outreach. Finally, the last domain, which is the advances that the project itself is providing. And the first one, we would like to highlight the centralized pool of energy sharing services that will be provisioned. This will be the basis, and it's a key output of our interoperable ecosystem. The knowledge exchange of services will now enable users to be in the forefront to exchange their services, to exchange their providers, and to have a lot of more flexibility to decide, for example, which services their utilities are providing and catering for them. Secondly, we are providing here social innovation strategies and also new consumer behavior-centric designs. And this is where we will be including mainly the use of artificial intelligence in the provision of new designs, new services, and new data, so new knowledge based on the knowledge that is provided by the services in itself. And this is key to expand the capability of services and going beyond what the services themselves provide. We are providing here a user-centric approach for market uptake. That is, we are looking at the services as the key factor that will be providing scalability. And this is what will boost our ecosystem. This is what partners outside and within the consortium can use as the Lego pieces to build up on the ecosystem and to create new services and new business use cases. Finally, as I stated, we are working towards cross-sector, and this is key. The project departed from the energy and the comfort use cases and ICT, but this is not just the limit. The services that we are providing and catering for within the ecosystem of InterConnect will go beyond that, and that's why we also want the participation of others, mainly through the cascade funding initiatives that we can see ahead. One of the key outputs of the interoperability framework is the service store. The service store acts as the registry of interoperable services that we do have on our ecosystem. This is a web-based front end that will be the gateway to service providers and later on to our partners that will enroll during the Cascade funding initiatives to enroll their services, to consult the ecosystem of InterConnect, to find and search the capabilities of these services, and also to expedite and explore on the knowledge capabilities of each one of these services. This will be the basis and the entry point towards the InterConnect interoperable ecosystem, and this will be the place where interoperable services will be launched, and with the capability for all of these partners to enroll and to expedite on the capabilities. This will be an important tool for this handover to the pilots and later on to the services that will be provided to the community. So this is important not only for service providers, but also for consumers that will be enrolled here. So this was key and is one of the components of the interoperability framework, as I said. Let's now tackle what has been now the contribution that is being prepared for the open calls. This is an important part of the project. So far we have presented the main outputs that the consortium has within produced, and we are now going beyond and providing what is the outreach to the community. So the project in itself will launch these open call contributions via a Cascade funding initiative, and this initiative in itself is divided into several stages or domains. Let's address the first one. So the first one is our current stage at month 24, which will dive into the strategy and internal alignment. So now the consortium is preparing a set of the documentation packages that are bundling what is the information about the project, what is the reference architecture, what is the documentation on the interoperability framework, how should it be addressed, and how can then these partners enrolling through the Cascade funding initiatives can take advantage of that. Secondly, we want to activate SMEs and startups. These will be the key candidates to enroll within our open call initiatives. So we are now boosting a set of dissemination activities to launch the open calls and the objectives. This will be the basis for SMEs and startups to enroll within the project and to become part of InterConnect's interoperable ecosystem. So the third domain that we would like to address here is, of course, recruiting the best innovators. So not only candidates will need to provide what is their intentions on top of innovation and how they will plan to use the interoperability framework to bring along their best business models and use cases. And this will be the key to decide which partners will be provided extra funding through the open calls initiative and to enroll within InterConnect in itself. We would like to point out that we have different capabilities and different types of projects, not only to enroll directly on pilots, where 4 of our pilots will be selected to these to take part on this, but also to direct funding to the open calls candidates to devise small prototypes and demonstrations on their business models. It is important to note, just like within the consortium, that these candidates will require high TRL or medium TRL services, 6 and above, to enroll within the project and to be part of our interoperable ecosystem. And so the fourth domain here is also very important, which is the provision of support. So the project is not just only providing funding to these candidates that will enroll on our Cascade funding initiatives, it is also providing all the necessary support on terms of technology, on terms of documenting, and on terms of positioning between each one of the pilots. And this will be provided by the consortium team throughout the time that these Cascade funding initiatives will last. The fifth point that we would like to provide here is also the validation of the project approach. So we are not just providing funding to the Cascade partners through these initiatives and to bring them along within our large-scale pilots. We are also using that as means to feed back into the project loop, to continuously improve the capabilities of the interoperability framework and the project in itself on the positioning towards the market. And finally, We want to expand here the ecosystem of players. And this is important not only for the KPIs of the project, but also for the interoperability framework and for the technological advances that the project will provide in itself. So as I said, we will be included here 4 associated pilots. 42 new interoperable services are provisioned and are foreseen to be born out of this initiative, and we are expecting to enroll more than 1,000 SMEs and startups, at least in the preliminary cascade funding initiatives and launch of the project in itself. Finally, 100% bottom-up projects will improve and will be focused on improving energy efficiency, mainly through the exchange of knowledge data. So what is still in the project, in the process for InterConnect? Well, our next steps will be the increase in the portfolio of platforms and services with the cascading. So as I just said, revealing what the process will look like, the Cascade Funding Initiative will be devoted 3.6 million euros in funding to fund these candidates and also to sponsor their expressions of interest to enroll on our Cascade Funding initiatives. We would like also to take and leverage on what is the current status of the project to assess what is the performance of the interoperability framework. So we are not only expediting this from what is our large-scale pilots, but we are also taking into account our open call candidates that will be funded to sponsor, test, and continuously improve what is the technology and to finally to provide that uptake to the market. We are aiming here continuously on the deployment of digital solutions. And this is not just from the perspective of digital services. This goes from devices to digital platforms and with the services hosted on those digital platforms. That will be the key to enroll and to provide our ecosystem of interoperable services that can later on be used not only through the consortium, through the cascade funding partners, but also beyond. And it's important to note that the service store and the other main components of the interoperability framework will be widely available to the public to use, and hence here continuously boost the deployment of digital solutions. Finally, all of the work that has been done on the ontology front, not only on the SARIFization process of the services, that also cascade funding partners will have to undergo, but also the private partners that may want to use through the wider public, all of these components and improvements will be included in extensions to the SAREF-based family of ontologies. And these will be submitted to standardization initiatives. That will be a key outroll for the project, and this is what we would like to highlight now. So this has been the end of our first part of our session, where we explore the pathway to innovation